I wonder what she is doing at this time of night.
A wealthy executive needed help for his silent daughter. He hired a gentlewoman with no credentials. Hidden cameras captured her slow, quiet progress. But the footage showed more than he ever expected. Tariq Al-Naim was a name that meant power. When he spoke, buildings went up in the desert sky. He owned oil companies and huge technology businesses. His life was about control, precision, and always winning. He was one of the richest men in Dubai, a person who never looked back and never showed weakness to anyone. But his home was the one place where none of his money or power worked. Nothing in his huge, successful life had prepared him for the deep, confusing job of being a father to his daughter, Samira. 2 years ago, Samira's world stopped. Her mother, Tariq's wife, died in a sudden, fast car crash on the highway outside the city. After that day, Samira, who was 5 years old then, simply retreated. She stopped speaking. She stopped laughing. She stopped looking at the people who looked at her. The doctors came from all over the world. They were famous people with many letters after their names. They told Tariq that Samira had severe autism, made worse by the shock of losing her mother. She had what they called regressive behavior, meaning she was moving backward, deeper into herself, away from the world. Tariq, who could solve multi-million-dollar problems with a single phone call, was completely helpless. He spent a fortune. He turned a huge section of his mansion into a special sensory room. It had walls that changed color slowly, soft tunnels made of silk, and pools of warm, quiet water. He had special computers installed that could talk back to a child, but still, nothing worked. Samira would only sit in her room, rocking back and forth, making a low, soft noise that was almost a hum, but completely empty of feeling. It was a noise of being alone. Tariq was completely exhausted. He felt like he was drowning in the polished perfection of his own home. He would stand in the hallway and listen to the silence coming from his daughter's room. And that silence was the loudest, most painful sound in his life. He felt like a failure, not as a businessman, but as a man. Tariq's sister, Yasmin, was the one who finally made a different move. Yasmin was practical and worried about the family name, but she also loved Samira. She went outside the normal channels, outside the lists of famous, expensive doctors. She found a woman named Zola. Zola was from a small village in Africa. She didn't have a single college degree. Her paperwork was simple and looked old. She had one main reference from a small local hospital where she had worked with children who had special needs. The only other thing on her record was that she had raised her younger siblings' children after a family tragedy. Tariq did not want to meet Zola. He looked at her simple resume and felt a wave of disrespect. How could this plain, uncertified woman do what the world's best doctors could not? But Yasmin insisted, almost begging. "Tariq, please," Yasmin said. "They are too loud. They try too hard. The experts you hire, they see a broken machine to fix. This woman, she might just see a frightened child. Give her 1 week. No pressure, no therapy, just 1 week to be with Samira." Tariq agreed, but only because he was so completely tired of fighting. He had no hope left. He just wanted the argument to end. He felt like he was hiring someone to watch his daughter fail one last time before he gave up completely. When Zola arrived, she moved very quietly through the huge estate entrance. She carried a small bag with what looked like toys she had made herself from simple materials: wood, cloth, and brightly colored string. Her voice, when she spoke, was very gentle. "Sir," she said to Tariq, standing respectfully before him, "I am not a miracle worker. I am not trained in all these high-level ways. I only try to listen." The word listen hit Tariq hard. He was used to being listened to, not listening himself. He just told his head of staff, Idris, to show Zola to the special wing and leave her alone with Samira. The silent observation. For the first few days, Zola did almost nothing. She didn't try to touch Samira. She didn't try to force her to speak. Samira would sit and rock back and forth, staring at a spot on the carpet. Zola would sit a few feet away, on a small, soft mat she had placed on the floor. She would not talk. She would not even look directly at Samira. Instead, Zola would just be present. She would hum old, quiet songs from her home. They were soft and repetitive, with a slow, soothing rhythm. If Samira rocked, Zola would gently sway her body too, matching the child's silent beat. It was like Zola was learning Samira's secret, internal language, the one she spoke with her body and her silence. Tariq started watching the security cameras. He had forgotten they were there, but now his attention was completely fixed on the tiny hidden lenses. They were tucked behind the beautiful, expensive lighting fixtures and framed along the doors of Samira's wing. He found himself unable to focus on his work. He would hold his phone, watching the live feeds. He was looking for a fault. He was looking for Zola to lose her temper, to give up, to do something unprofessional that would allow him to fire her and forget this whole confusing experiment. But all he saw was quiet, unmoving patience. On the third day, Zola brought out a small bowl of water. It was an ordinary clay bowl. She set it on the floor near Samira. She then placed a small flat stone on the edge of the bowl and began to gently tap it with her finger. Tap, tap, tap. "Little drops," Zola whispered, not to Samira, but to the bowl. "The rain is coming. It brings the color back." Samira did not move, but Tariq, watching on his screen, saw it. Samira's eyes, usually dull and fixed, flickered down to the bowl for half a second. It was the smallest movement. But to Tariq, it was a seismic shift. It was the first time Samira had acknowledged something happening in the room that wasn't part of her own silent ritual. Tariq felt a strange, terrifying rush in his chest. Hope, he realized, felt exactly like fear when you hadn't felt it in 2 years. Over the next week, Tariq became obsessed with the camera feeds. He started canceling important calls. He stayed up late in his private study, the room filled with the quiet, cold light of the monitors. He was no longer running an empire. He was watching a small, private play with 2 actors. He watched Zola bring a plain wooden block, nothing special, and gently roll it towards Samira. No response. Zola rolled it again. Again, nothing. She rolled it dozens of times over 2 days. She never looked upset. She never stopped. Then, on the 9th day of her being there, Zola placed a small, thin blanket on the floor. She took a tiny, polished mirror and placed it on the blanket. Samira was still sitting close to the wall. Zola whispered toward the mirror, "Look at this face, little star. This face belongs to a girl who is very strong. She is learning to come out of the dark." Zola was speaking to her own reflection, but she was telling Samira's story. Tariq saw Samira's head tilt, maybe an inch, no more. She was listening. She didn't flinch. She didn't retreat. She was absorbing the words into her silence. That night, Tariq couldn't sleep at all. He kept the small monitor running next to his bed. He watched the scene in the night vision mode. A blue, fuzzy image of Zola sleeping on a thin mattress on the floor of Samira's room, while Samira rocked quietly in her bed nearby. Tariq realized that Zola wasn't doing therapy. She was giving Samira something the doctors couldn't give: absolute, unmovable presence. She was telling Samira, "Without words, I am here. I will not leave. I will enter your world, not force you to enter mine." This realization softened Tariq. The control he loved so much, the control he sought by watching the cameras, was slowly starting to melt away. He felt a deep, strange comfort. The house, for the first time since his wife's death, didn't feel like a beautiful tomb. The first word and the storm. The progress became small but steady. Samira started to touch things. She gently picked up the stones Zola used. She started drawing on the whiteboard Zola had put up. Just lines and shapes, but deliberate lines. Then came the moment that changed everything for Tariq. He was in his study, trying to focus on a meeting, but the camera feed was on. Zola was sitting with Samira, guiding the child's trembling hand to draw a simple circle. Zola whispered, "A face, little one, a happy, sunny face." And then Samira turned her head slightly toward Zola. Her lips moved, and a soft, low sound came out. "Ma." It wasn't a full word. It wasn't perfect, but it was Ma. It was the sound for mother, and Samira hadn't made a sound like that for 2 years. Tariq physically recoiled from the desk. His breath hitched. He replayed the 1-second clip 4 times. Tears, hot and unexpected, sprang to his eyes. He hadn't cried like that in front of anyone since he was a child. He wanted to run into the room, to grab Zola and Samira, to celebrate this huge, impossible win. But he didn't move. He knew that whatever was happening, it was happening between Zola and Samira. His money and his emotional interference could only hurt it. He stayed frozen in his chair, watching the quiet miracle unfold. But the house was large, and secrets were hard to keep. Tariq's sister, Yasmin, saw the change in Samira, and it filled her with dread. Yasmin was a keeper of tradition. She felt Zola was an outsider, too close, too successful. When she learned that Samira had made the sound ma, Yasmin felt a wave of fear and anger. This woman is stealing her mother's place, Yasmin thought. She is using her sadness to replace us. Yasmin began to ask around. She started searching Zola's background, not looking for proof of competence, but proof of danger, the poison of suspicion. Yasmin's fear was infectious. She started planting seeds of doubt in Tariq's mind, whispering about the rumors she'd found. "Tariq," Yasmin said one morning as they walked through the hallway, "you know Zola has no records. You trust her with your only child, the heiress to your entire company. I did some checking. She was connected to a case where a child disappeared in Ghana. They said she was caring for the child." Tariq stiffened. He hated gossip, but this was about Samira. "There were no charges, Yasmin. It was a tragedy. But tragedy follows her brother," Yasmin pressed. "She has her own deep pain. People who carry that much grief are unpredictable. What if she sees Samira as a replacement for her own lost child? What if she takes her away, emotionally or physically?" Tariq's hard businessman mind took over. Yasmin's words, though cruel, were logical. He was a man who planned against all risks. Zola was an unknown risk. That same evening, Tariq received a call from Idris, his head of security. Idris was ex-military, loyal, and efficient. "Sir, we did a review of the late-night feeds from the last week as you requested. There is something strange with Zola. She was in the garden area at 3 a.m. for several nights. We checked the motion sensors." Tariq went immediately to the control room. Idris pulled up the footage. The video was fuzzy and dark. Zola was indeed walking barefoot on the grass. In her hand, she held what looked like a piece of cloth. As she walked back toward the house, she paused. Then she did the thing that froze Tariq's blood. She looked directly into the camera, the small hidden sphere above the doorframe. Her stare was utterly still and cold. For a moment, she held up the cloth, and in the bad light, it looked like it was stained a deep, shocking red. "We don't know what that is, sir," Idris murmured. "It could be mud, it could be paint, but the direct stare at the camera, it feels like she knows we are watching. It feels like a challenge." Tariq dismissed Idris. He sat alone in the dark control room, the cold light of the screens reflecting in his eyes. The fear was back, sharp and sickening. Why the direct stare? Why the middle of the night? Why the cloth? He had seen his daughter whisper, "Ma." Now he saw Zola staring at him with the cold eyes of a ghost. He felt completely torn apart. The beautiful, fragile peace she had brought was now tainted by a dark, chilling doubt. Tariq couldn't sleep. He sat in his study until the first hint of morning light crept into the windows. He had already made up his mind. He couldn't risk Samira's fragile progress on a feeling, no matter how good that feeling had been. He needed answers that were hard, not soft. He called for Zola. She entered the room calmly. Her hands were folded gently, and there was a quiet strength in her posture. She showed no fear, only deep, unsettling calmness. Tariq did not stand. He wanted to look like the CEO, the man of authority. "I have been watching the cameras, Zola." "I know, sir," she replied simply. His heart jumped. "And you know I recorded everything you do?" "Of course," she said. "The cameras are everywhere. But they only show what you want to see. They do not show the truth." Tariq stood up now, his voice rising, thick with accusation. "The truth is, I saw you at 3 a.m. in the garden. I saw you look at the camera. I saw you holding a cloth that looked like blood. What were you doing? Are you stealing? Are you performing some sort of ritual?" Zola did not move. She reached into her bag and slowly pulled out the cloth he had seen. She laid it on his desk. It was a child's scarf, embroidered with bright yellow flowers, but the edges were red. Not with blood, but with a deep, earthy red dye from the thread used in the stitching. It looked worn and loved. The night before, Samira was very upset, Zola explained softly. She threw this out of her window into the dark bushes. She can't talk to tell you she lost it, but she can point with her sadness. She didn't want to sleep without it. So I went to find it before the sun came up and before the gardening staff could cut the bushes. She picked up the scarf, holding it gently. I looked at the camera because I knew you were there, Tariq Al-Naim. I hoped that seeing me, an ordinary woman, doing an ordinary act of care, would make you stop looking for the scandal and see the love. Tariq felt a wave of intense shame. His hands trembled. He focused back on the second, bigger question. The lost child in Ghana, he said, forcing the words out. The girl with epilepsy who ran away. Tell me the full truth. Was it your fault? Zola's eyes closed for a brief, pained moment. When she opened them, they were full of a deep, familiar sorrow. Her name was Imani. She was 6. She ran into the woods during a seizure, and she didn't stop. I was with the clinic staff who searched for her for 2 days. I was the one who found her body. Tariq stood silent, waiting. It broke me, sir, because Imani was the same age as my own daughter, Abena, who had died of a fever a year earlier. I couldn't save my own child, and then I couldn't save Imani. I carry that pain with me every day, but that pain is why I can listen to Samira's silence. I know what deep loss feels like. I know how to be present in the presence of grief. Why did you hide this from me? Tariq asked, his voice now just a whisper. Would you have hired me if I told you? Zola countered, her voice gentle but firm. You wanted a perfect professional answer. Samira needed a flawed, loving person. I am not a miracle. I just see the truth in children's eyes. Tariq was completely disarmed. He knew Zola was telling the truth. The shame he felt was almost unbearable. He had doubted the best thing that had happened to his daughter in years. Just as he was about to apologize, the door opened. Yasmin, alerted by the raised voices, stood there, looking nervous but triumphant. She had been waiting for this moment. She has to go, Tariq, Yasmin said instantly, her eyes bright with a sense of duty. The risk is too high. She is admitted to emotional instability. She is using her own tragedy to bind herself to Samira. Zola looked directly at Tariq, ignoring Yasmin. She needs trust, not fear, Zola repeated. The truth was now clear. Zola was good, pure, and effective. But Yasmin's words had planted a poison that was hard to remove. What happens when Zola leaves? The thought was a crippling wave of anxiety. Tariq couldn't bear the thought of Samira breaking again. He chose the safe path, the predictable path. Even if it was the wrong one, he chose control over courage. Zola, Tariq said, his voice flat, I appreciate your honesty, but I need you to leave the estate. I will pay you for a year, but I need you to go. Zola looked at Samira's closed bedroom door, a look of profound sorrow on her face. She didn't argue. She just nodded slowly. As she reached the door, she paused and looked back at Tariq. Her last words were quiet, but they echoed in the huge, empty room. You are sending away the one person who truly sees your daughter. You will regret this more than any business loss you have ever had. She needs you to be brave, not safe. And then she was gone. Tariq left his study, but he didn't go to his room. The huge mansion felt like a cold, empty cave. The finality of his decision was a stone in his stomach. Zola's last words, she needs you to be brave, not safe, played over and over in his mind. He walked through the silent, echoing hallways, and every step felt heavy and wrong. He kept listening to Samira's closed door, but the familiar rhythmic rocking was gone. There was only the terrible, heavy silence that had returned, a sound that was worse this time, because now he knew what the house could sound like when it was happy. He went back to the control room, not to watch Zola, but to watch his own mistake. He pulled up the archive video from the day Samira first said, Ma. He watched Zola's face when she heard it. Not triumph, not pride, but a simple, deep joy. It was the face of a person giving, not taking. He realized the camera had not lied about the events, but he had lied to himself about the meaning. Then he pulled up the footage of Yasmin entering the study late at night, searching the computer archives. Tariq saw the look of nervous intensity on his sister's face and realized her actions were born of her own deep pain. Yasmin felt lost since their mother died, and Tariq's close, quiet bond with Zola threatened the only place Yasmin felt powerful. Being the trusted advisor, the traditional keeper of the family. Tariq saw his own fear of loss reflected in his sister's panic. They were both terrified of losing what little family connection they had left, and he had let her fear become his logic. Tariq sat there for hours, watching the history of the past 2 weeks unfold. He watched Zola's calm approach dozens of times. He saw her teaching Samira to touch things gently. He saw her using the small, polished mirror to let Samira see Zola's happy face. It was all so simple, so patient. He realized that for Zola, the cameras were not a threat, but an opportunity. She knew he needed proof, and she acted in plain sight, trusting that his heart would eventually override his fear. He remembered the locket, the red dye, the tears he had held back for 2 years. He had valued the cold, certain logic of risk management over the warm, complicated truth of love. Now, he was alone with his business logic, and it offered no comfort. The house was a huge, beautiful prison, and he had just thrown away the key to his daughter's happiness. He eventually walked out, leaving the screens glowing, and went to Samira's door, wanting to touch her, to apologize, but he was too late. The silence from her room was too complete, too heavy. It was the silence of a door that had been gently opened and then slammed shut again by his own fear. The silence returned to the mansion like a physical blow. It was a sharp, biting silence this time, not the gentle, watchful one Zola had brought. When Samira woke up a few hours later, she felt the emptiness immediately. She didn't know the word gone, but she knew the feeling. Zola was simply not there. Samira didn't hum. She didn't look toward the garden. She retreated back to her rocking on the carpet, but this time her rocking was faster, more frantic, and louder. Tariq spent the next 3 days in a haze of guilt and professional activity, trying to ignore the pain coming from the next room. He called in a different therapist, a very famous, expensive woman from Germany. The German therapist, trying to be upbeat, brought in new toys and bright flashcards. She tried to show Samira a picture of a flower and say the word. Samira looked at the flashcard, she looked at the woman, and then she screamed. It wasn't a cry of sadness. It was a long, deep, terrifying scream of shattered security. It was a sound that broke Tariq's professional composure completely. The scream went on, raw and desperate. Samira curled into herself, her knees pulled to her chest, rocking violently, refusing to be touched. Tariq finally lost control. He ran into the room, pushed the therapist aside, and dropped to his knees next to his daughter. He tried to hold her, but she physically recoiled from his touch. Moving back toward the wall, he sat back, his heart pounding with panic. He was poison to her. His doubt, his fear, had cost him the one piece of connection he had regained. Samira looked at him, really looked at him, and her eyes were filled with rejection and betrayal. That night, Tariq was broken. He didn't go to his office. He went to the hidden, soundproof control room where the security archives were kept. He didn't look for Zola's mistakes. He looked for the truth he had missed. He spent hours going through old footage, looking for the hidden clues Zola had spoken about. He found a clip from weeks ago, before the ma sound. Zola and Samira were playing with a small clay bowl of water. Samira was humming, Zola was tapping the stone. Then, Samira stopped humming. She got up and walked to a large bookshelf in the library. She paused near a specific section of the shelf, the one with the rare, old family books. Samira reached out her small, trembling fingers and tapped the wood panel behind the books. Tap, tap, tap. 3 small, deliberate taps. Then she turned back to Zola. Zola watched her, nodded, and pointed to the bowl of water. Samira went back to playing. Tariq's breath caught. He knew that bookshelf. He knew that panel. It was a secret false panel that hid a small silver box, his late wife's memory box. It contained her most personal items, old photos, and a small voice recorder she used to keep near Samira's crib. No one but Tariq and his wife had known about it. Not Yasmin, not Idris, no one. Samira, in her silent autistic world, had remembered the box, and she had communicated its location to Zola through 3 small taps. Zola hadn't stolen the box. She had been led to it by Samira's secret language. Zola wasn't a thief or a threat. She was a translator for his daughter's trapped mind. Tariq's chest was constricted with immense guilt. He had sent away the only person who understood the soul of his child, all because a red thread looked like blood in a dark, cheap camera lens. He picked up his phone. He had to beg. He had to be humble. He had to be honest. He called Zola's number. It rang for a long time. Finally, she answered. "Zola," he said, his voice completely hollow. "I am sorry. I saw the footage. I know you were telling the truth. I was blinded by my own fear. Samira is screaming. She is gone again. I need you to come back. Please, I am asking you to save me." There was a long silence on the line, long enough for Tariq to think she had hung up. Then Zola's voice, quiet and steady, came back. "She is not a case. She is not broken. She just needs you to be the truth, not the lie. I will come back. I am already at the gate." Tariq dropped the phone. He ran to the window. The gate lights were already turning on. She had been waiting for him to call. She had never truly left. Tariq went to the grand foyer. He didn't get dressed. He didn't comb his hair. He stood barefoot on the cold marble, a man stripped of all his powerful titles, waiting like a child for his mother. The main door opened softly, and Zola entered. She looked tired, but her eyes held a profound, calm understanding. She looked at Tariq, who was shaking slightly, and gave a brief, gentle nod. Then, they both looked up. Samira was standing at the top of the staircase. She was wearing her small, simple pajamas and holding the sunflower scarf Zola had retrieved from the bushes. She wasn't rocking. She was still. Slowly, carefully, Samira began to descend the long staircase. Tariq whispered her name, Samira, but she didn't look at him. She was focused completely on Zola. Samira walked straight to Zola and stopped. The entire house seemed to hold its breath. Then Samira did the impossible. She reached up her hand and placed it on Zola's face. It was the first time she had initiated touch with anyone since her mother died. The gesture was tentative, fragile, but full of connection. And then Samira whispered a single, clear word, the word Zola had taught her to feel, the word Tariq had taken away from her. Safe. The word echoed in the marble foyer. It hit Tariq with the force of 1,000 waves. He couldn't hold it back anymore. The years of bottled-up grief, the fear, the professional facade, it all shattered. He dropped to one knee, the richest, most controlled man in the country, and wept openly, uncontrollably. He grabbed Samira, not hard, but with a sudden, desperate need, pulling her into his arms. He pressed his face into her hair. "I'm sorry," he choked out. "I'm so sorry, my flower. I'm sorry for being afraid." Zola knelt beside them, placing one steady hand on Samira's back. "The lie is gone," she said softly to Tariq. "Now the truth can grow." We move forward. Tariq looked up at Zola, his face wet with tears. He had finally surrendered, mending the broken pieces. That morning, Tariq addressed his entire household staff, from Idris, the head of security, to the smallest maintenance worker. Zola stood beside him, holding Samira, who was now quietly content, playing with the red-dyed scarf. Yasmin was also present, standing stiffly in the back. "I called you here to correct a great wrong I committed," Tariq announced, his voice still hoarse but strong. "I allowed suspicion and fear to drive out the person who brought peace and healing to this house. I doubted Zola's character, and I sent her away based on rumors and misread images." He looked around the room, making eye contact with every person. "From this moment forward, Zola is a full member of this family. Her word is truth in this house, especially regarding Samira. The time for surveillance is over. The time for trust has begun." A few junior staff members started to clap tentatively. Then Idris joined in, and soon the entire parlor was filled with applause. Yasmin clapped too, slowly, her pride finally bowing to the overwhelming evidence of her brother's relief and her niece's returning life. Later that afternoon, Tariq found Zola sitting in the courtyard garden. Samira was next to her, slowly stacking the river stones they had used weeks ago. "Why did you come back so quickly?" Tariq asked, sitting across from her. "You could have demanded anything. You could have been angry." Zola smiled gently. "I never left, Tariq. I was waiting for you to open the door, not for me, but for yourself. I knew when Samira screamed, she wasn't rejecting me. She was rejecting the fear you had allowed back into the house. My place is with her, not with you." Tariq nodded. The the complexity of her statement settling deep in his heart. He hesitated, then brought up the painful subject again. "Tell me about your daughter, Abina, please." Zola looked at Samira, who was now gently humming a recognizable tune. "She was 9, Zola said quietly. "A perfect, bright girl. She died of a sudden, brutal fever. We had no medicine. I couldn't save her. I spent a year carrying that sorrow like a heavy stone. But when I see children like Samira, who are silent, who are trapped, I feel Abina's hand guiding me. I can't save Abina, but I can hear the children who need to be heard. My pain taught me how to listen to the silence. It is a gift I pay for every day." Tariq looked at his daughter, who was smiling at her stack of stones. It wasn't just healing, it was a profound transformation of the entire house's atmosphere. He realized Zola hadn't come to fix Samira. She had come to fix him. The end of the lens. The weeks and months that followed were completely different. Tariq spent less time in his high-tech office and more time on the floor with Zola and Samira. He learned to play the quiet games, to recognize the tilt of Samira's head, to hear the story her humming told. He learned to be present instead of powerful. Samira's progress was slow, filled with setbacks, but it was real. She started using short, functional words, sometimes just a sound or a look. Tariq had stopped needing perfect sentences. He only needed the connection. Zola stayed on, becoming a stable, unshakable part of the family structure, treating Tariq with the same patient understanding she gave Samira. One afternoon, Tariq was cleaning out his private study, preparing to turn it into a comfortable reading room. He found the box of old security equipment, the tiny lenses, the archived recordings. He picked up one of the small, round cameras. It felt cold and foreign in his hand, a symbol of a time when he trusted data more than his own heart. He looked out the window. Samira was in the garden with Zola, running, giggling a short, choppy, but real laugh as Zola chased her with a bright piece of cloth. Samira stopped, saw her father watching, and she waved. She waved with a full, wide arm, a natural, joyful movement. And then she spoke, clearly and happily, using a word that was just for him. "Baba, come!" Tariq put the camera down. He didn't need to record it. He didn't need proof. That moment, full of sunlight and real laughter, was etched into his soul forever, safe from any lens. He walked out the door, leaving the cameras behind. He no longer needed to watch trust happen. He finally knew how to feel it. The long, silent period of his life was finally, truly over. The quiet legacy years passed. Samira grew into a young woman who still moved through the world differently, quietly. But she was fully present in her own life and in her relationship with her father. She had hard days, moments of deep withdrawal, but she always knew where to find safety and truth. Tariq became a different kind of executive. He still built towers, but he started using his wealth for foundations that focused on mental health and specialized communication for children. He learned that the quietest voices are often the most important to hear. Zola remained a cornerstone of their life. She eventually used her settlement to start a foundation back in her home country, a place where children like Imani and Abena could get the simple, vital care they needed. She traveled back and forth, but the mansion in Dubai would always be her safe harbor. Tariq learned to trust his emotions, to embrace the risks that come with love, and to accept the help of others. He learned that true control doesn't come from watching others, but from accepting your own vulnerability. He learned that sometimes the greatest wisdom comes not from a book or a degree, but from a simple woman who knew how to listen to the silent language of a broken heart. He learned that he was not just a successful businessman, he was a healed father, thanks to the quiet strength of the woman he had almost sent away. The silence of the mansion was gone forever, replaced by the steady, unshakable rhythm of genuine, earned peace. He would sometimes see the young staff members setting up new security systems and smile. He knew the cameras were important for the house, but they were useless for the heart. He had found his truth not by watching, but by simply looking. The entire family, including Yasmin, was changed. Yasmin eventually admitted her fear had been driven by her own unprocessed grief over their mother, and she sought to repair her relationship with Tariq and Zola. The house became a place of honesty, where silence was respected but never feared. Tariq often thought about the direct, knowing stare Zola had given the camera that night. It wasn't defiance, it was a final message of faith. She knew he was watching, and she trusted that if he watched long enough, he would finally see the difference between an honest heart and a hidden threat. She had forced him to look past the surface and accept the messy, complicated, and ultimately beautiful reality of love. He had closed the door on his fear and opened the door to his life. And that was the greatest success story of his entire career. He would forever be grateful for the woman who had not saved his money, but had saved his soul.